Lawrence Green.
Here.
Heather Murphy. Here. Michelle Weber here. Jacob Wilson.
Here.
Not
Here.
here. Here. And Susan Cox is absent today. Next, we don't have any public comments.
No public comment.
No public comments, so we will move directly into the Dave and Tea workshop.
Thank you. So while we're doing the presentation setup, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Dave Roth. I'm the Senior Director of Planning. And today we're going to be talking about our Connect 2025 long-range mobility plan. So great to be hosting this meeting in one of our service areas for a couple of our services. 98 Metro down here, and that's a connector. We've also been running a little pilot in the area surrounding Cottage Road. It's a great opportunity to connect with the area in down here. So I'm going to start this off. So the presentation today, we'll do some quick intros of the project team. We've got some representatives here with me today. We'll cover the project overview and process. We'll go through the transit and mobility toolbox. And we'll get into a little bit of an interactive engagement with the board and staff, present and guests, things like that. And then we'll wrap it up next step. So introduction. So I already introduced myself. So I'd like to introduce Carrie Aspar, who's associate planner with FD and also our deputy manager. And then Ryan Farnham, who's with Parametrics, who's the head of our consulting team. So I'm going to start us off, and I'm going to hand it off to Ryan. But before I do, I want to just remind the board that you've done a similar engagement activity that we're going to be doing today. It's something that you did back in, I believe it was at your board retreat in spring of 2023, or fall of 2023. This is when you envisioned the future of LTV in your 2028. So I have some collateral from that meeting if you remember this. So you have one, LTV makes history. Number one in mobility. Lane County jobs grow 30%. We have another one. Lane County voted most mobile and livable county in the U.S. So you've done a similar exercise. This was looking 20 years in the future. We're going to be looking a little bit, this is 10 years in the future. We're looking out 20 years in the future. So excited to engage you here. I'll also mention that this is the first of 4 interactions that we'll have with the project, and we'll talk about the project schedule we get into it here. So this is the first time we've really engaged in the project. We've already been engaging in the community quite a bit. I'm just going to tell you about the So project overview. What is Connect 2025? Well, it's a long-range plan that guides investments and policy decisions for the district. It's intended to help set expectations both for our public, our riders, the communities that we serve, our partner agencies that we work with on a regular basis, or organizations that we frequently work with, about our role and actions supporting change within the county. One of the purposes of the plan is to help us in our decision making. So we're faced with the decision on X. What does the plan tell us? So this is intended to provide us really solid guidance, foundational guidance on this, and to be transparent and very clear in our communication how we're spending. It establishes priorities and identifies funding sources, and will also discuss future funding needs. This is an important conversations happening right now at the state level around transportation more broadly and transit in that context. And then why are we doing this now? Well, we do have an existing long-range plan that's adopted by the LTE board back in 2014, for a decade ago, so it's been a while since we've taken this focused look and had a robust conversation with around what the long-term vision is, mobility, transportation. It's really time. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian for the planning process itself. Thanks, David. There we go. Okay. So broadly speaking, our planning process has a number of steps. One of the first things we did right out of the gate was review all of these and really partner existing planning goals to understand the bigger picture context of how we develop this plan. We set initial goals and objectives, and part of our conversation today is helping us continue to hone those for we're also kind of in the midst, just about done with existing and future conditions. So this is what is the lay of the land today in terms of services, population, needs, issues, and we'll be talking more about that at the meeting certainly, and the needs assessment that goes along with that. And then based on those needs, we're going to be developing improvement options. So what are different approaches for addressing these needs? In some cases, that may mean we have alternatives, as in we could do this, we could do that. Which should we do? Which best aligns with our vision and goals? And that's what we've aligned your help with the public staff and help us solidify those ideas, and then put that all together in the draft plan and thinking more about implementation. So we don't want a plan that sits on a shelf, right? That's not great. So we want to craft a useful long-range plan. So a few things that we know are important to making a plan useful. So first, a vision, so that we have a common understanding when everybody working on this project or involved in the community. Where is it we're trying to head? An important piece during the process is also internal engagement within LTE to get the perspectives and knowledge of all the folks who do the organization and gain buy-in about the kinds of things that we're going to be saying in the plan. The plan is only useful if everyone is bought into what it says. As Dave mentioned, this should support decision-making ultimately for the agency, ideally along into the future. And it needs clear and specific priorities. These are two bags that might not be helpful for the world. So along with that, clear strategies. One thing we also want to develop is some near-term actions. So this is a 20-year look. We'd like to identify some of those kind of immediate wins that could be had as a result of this process to give some momentum behind the plan and also show people that we're really taking action already. We do also want to make sure that the recommendations are aligned with the capacity of the needs. So we want to be visionary, we want to think big, we want to think broadly about how we can address mobility needs in the county, but we also need to keep in mind the capacity of the agency to deliver this. And then finally, performance measures can help us keep track of how things are changing and how we can progress on. Schedule, big picture. So here we are getting towards the end of summer 2026. So we've already had our first public involvement milestone. We'll talk a little more about public involvement in a second. But we're very shortly going to be getting into looking at improvement options here this fall. And that's when I expect we'll be back with you to talk more about here are the needs we've identified, and here's some ideas about how to address them. We'll go back out to the public in a more substantial way in the first part of 2027 to vet those improvements and then put the draft plan together by next summer. So as Dave mentioned, we have more touch points with you all as we go along this process. So decision-making process with the project management team, which is Dave, Carey, and myself, along with other team friends. We're the day-to-day managers of this group, where we have two very important committees that are meeting several times throughout this as well. We have a community advisory committee, which has really great and broad representation from across the service area and beyond. And then our technical advisory committee, which is more jurisdictional staff and partners. We're also meeting with those jurisdictional partners several times, staying close with them throughout to ensure we understand what their interests and needs are in this, and also communicating back to them what the interests and needs are of LTD in all this. And then, of course, you all are a very important role in helping us draft the plan, but then also ultimately the approval of the plan. So on the engagement for the project, so we have, back to that schedule, we have 3 major engagement milestones, but I think it's fair to say that engagement's kind of happening throughout the entire project. But one thing we're leaning on here is LTD's community outreach framework, which I imagine most of you are familiar with. So these principles are underpinning our overall approach to engagement. I already mentioned these couple of committees that are helping us throughout in the board meetings, but we have meetings with other institutions, with other organizations that are interested. We do have capacity for small group meetings and focus groups with very specific questions groups. And then good old-fashioned public events. We've had one open house already. Attorney Carey does we want to talk a little about some of the things that we're that, and that's just a little bit of we can change. And then walking those opportunities, right? There's a lot of engagement going on around different things beyond connection with feedback, right? So to the extent possible, we're also getting the word out at other events or tabling events that we use before. That the city of Eugene, for example, the city has the River Road 589 project, which is going on at the same time, so we're looking for that.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So the LTD team and City team have really been counting engagement to spread the word about this project and to ask community members what they envision LTD services to be like in 2045. So in about 4 weeks that we've kicked off public engagement, we've had 18 different events, including the open house and some other table events. And so we've averaged 4.5 events a week, which is really astounding. And I think that's just a strong testament to the good community and partner relationships that we have. First goal, the goal of the first phase of public engagement is to build awareness of the plan as well as to ask for resolution for transit risk. We also had a short survey that they've been circulating that's asking what the vision is. We've been getting some really interesting responses. We're still digesting a lot of the feedback and what we heard in the public house, but initially we're hearing about 4 different things. One is more frequency and more access to destinations, really enhancing our system as it is today. We've been hearing a lot about energy and electrification, really reflecting what gas prices are like. Folks have also been telling us they want new or better options, really thinking outside the box. So this can range from walkability to I want more buses further into my neighborhood. I want to carpool with my friends, things like that. So just thinking outside the box. And then rider comfort, safety, and accessibility. So that want the bus to be fun and clean. Very folks want more supportive services for drivers to speak, to support Spanish-speaking riders, more about our facilities, more wheelchair access, things like that. So we really hearing a lot from the community across those different events. Speaking directly to the August Open House, that was last Tuesday, we had really good turnouts. We were there in the evening. We had about 50 or so folks show up, and we shared what Ryan mentioned, what is our system like today, and asking people what their dream is for the future. And so we got some really great information from that with us. And we're, as I said, we're still digesting what it is, but we'll be getting some good feedback.
Great. Before we go forward, I just want to mention marketing, LTD marketing support and all of the work doing. They acknowledge their help on this. Before I move on to our next piece, which is a little bit of change of subject, are there any questions or comments? Sorry.
The government slide up there showed the draft plan. There's a bar for the draft plan to public input. Not seeing the public involvement, which been fitted on the screen.
So the second major milestone will be on those proven options, and we'll be going out to the public to talk to them and understand how do we want to invest in the future. That becomes the basis for us, the team, to draft the plan. And then that third milestone in next summer is when we go back out to the public to say, do we get it right?
I didn't see that.
You mentioned Spanish engagement. Were materials or the questions offered in Spanish in any of your public?
I believe that's still in the works, and we also have, additional engagement that will be focused more on technical communities, so,
Any other questions or comments? We're going through this stuff relatively speedily because we're trying to get us to the fun part of the conversation and wasn't talking at you. So before we get to that conversation, I did want to talk just a little bit about the smorgasbord of mobility tools that are at our disposal here. Because part of what we want to talk about with you is the future of LTD and its role as a mobility manager in the county, right? Which is a lot more than just the bus, right? So my intention here is just kind of run through some of these services. I know many of all you are very familiar with these, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, especially around terminology and the kinds of services that we're talking about. So it kind of starts from the MX to the kind of highest, serving the highest number of people, essentially. At high capacity trains in the region. So MX moves a lot of people and it connects busy and populated places, right? So it's that is the service that is ideally connecting with the busiest places in the region. Fixed route service, 11 or 1, so on, are your traditional bus that follows a fixed and defined route in the community. Buses may operate a certain time an hour, 15 minutes, or they may operate once per hour, depends on where they're at. Then there's a broad category of service that we're kind of couching under a term microtransit or on-demand, where there are more defined service areas. The connector here, Cottage Grove, is a great example. There's a defined service area, but not necessarily a defined route. So people can schedule a ride to get to a place they need to go or get to a transit stop we want to get to town, generally on the same day. There's a lot of different varieties of how that service can work. And then we have RideSource, which is, in some ways similar to what I just talked about around the general on-demand response. The RideSource is general eligibility restricted, right? So those are services for specific individuals with specific needs, and in the region, generally provided within most of the area where there is fixed route service. Another example of a mobility service that isn't exactly a traditional bus is taxi voucher or mobility subsidy programs. So these are often services in more rural areas where it may not be practical to run a route bus or an on-demand vehicle, but there are still mobility needs that we want to provide. So one way of doing that, for example, is a taxi voucher, essentially providing a subsidized ride on a taxi to location X. And then the last example we have here is shared micromobility, which again is not the bus, but it is things like bike share or scooter share. So it's human or electric assisted devices. They're often used for pretty short trips, right? And generally these are offered in more populous dense parts of the region.
So for example, the existing bike share program today. I mentioned these specifically because this is involved with shared micromobility, especially is an evolving area of transportation. And I think something that we will look at and ultimately roll in it part of this. A couple other things. One to mention Vanderbilt. This is a very commuter-focused type of service that's intended to get employees to a specific job location. Generally, it's a long distance kind of thing. And it may include subsidies to the providers. And then another example of another rural service is a volunteer driver program. In Gilliam County, for the robust volunteer driver program, where essentially you have volunteers helping you drive people to where they need to get, and often drivers are reimbursed or subsidized. So this, of course, isn't every possible mobility service that one can think of, but we wanted to give kind of an overview of the kinds of services that we see on the table as part of this plan. Are there any questions about any of these before I move on? This last slide here is kind of demonstrating how these services fit on a spectrum. We're thinking about serving a lot of people to dense places versus smaller number of people on one. Right? So again, on the far left, we have the bike paths and transit. Highest ridership serves a diversity of trip types that may be short and long. And on the other end, you have volunteer drivers, right, which are a lower number of people using them, and often those are longer trips because those are certain people in more rural areas. So, with that, we're getting to the discussion piece. What I want to first show you is the draft goals we developed for. Again, these are what feedback from the open house, research partners and CAC in the back, and then your feedback today will help us home. So I won't read them all to you. Connecting communities, promoting community development with the development aspirations of research partners, working together as one region on these things, operating in an adaptable and sustainable system, which has multiple facets to it. But I'm actually going to change our order around the discussion, because what I'd like to drive towards is a vision discussion that we started earlier, and continue that discussion essentially. And we have an activity. We'd like to break folks into groups, if you will, with us. And before we do that, we have for you on papers right here 4 different personas. So these are descriptions of people in Wayne County who are not real people, but they are intended to give a little information about where they live, their family status, what their trips are like on a daily basis. And the intent is to kind of represent the diversity of people in Wayne County and the diversity of mobility needs throughout the county. And so what we'd like each group to do is we'll assign a persona to each group and to think about these questions. There's a couple similar questions on the paper. What kinds of mobility needs do these people and these families have? What aspects of service are important? And so there's some things up here, right? So things like liability, frequency, accessibility. And then I think this is a crucial question. This will get us to the vision as well, is which of these challenges are LTD? Which of these challenges are LTD best suited to address? And so what we're getting at here is, I think this was mentioned earlier too, is that they may not, it's not necessarily the case, right, that we're looking for LTD to solve every possible mobility need in the county. That is fine. That's not necessarily reasonable, right? There are mobility needs to be addressed by partners. There are some mobility needs that may not be practical, frankly, to address. And so what I'm hoping this allows us to think about a little bit about is what are these needs? Should LTV address them? Can LTV address them? Driving towards trade-offs, right? In our vision. We want a lofty vision, but we also need to recognize the reality of resources. So how are we focusing our energy?
Yeah, that's great. So I think what we'll do is, how much time do we have? Let's see, 2:30, yeah. 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. And I think we'd also like to invite our guests to join. As we bring in the show. Yeah, that's it. So, guests. Here staff join us. My interview is just a full share inside, and we have 4 personas. We will just kind of count off. Who wants to? Yeah, okay. So why don't you guys? Yeah. No. And I'm gonna count you off. Don't trust us. Okay. Let's start with mine. We've got 4 of them. Right. They're all. Hey, Mike, can you join Randy and Howard? Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, and then you get Sarah. It's like right there, you might remember. There's some good accessibility. Yeah. 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 It's like what's little good.
Yeah, let's start it.
Yeah, that whole learning.
It's full work.
So we just, after what we heard today, just go in there. This is their dollars in the
I can't think of that.
well, it's what I know. The part we're getting to yeah. So you do all that.
Yes. Okay, just be clear, this question, but we're gonna come back together as we discuss.
Yes, I thought nice to the volume. So the needs are on there, right? Okay, what if I have that or explore that? guess it's good to specify.
Well, it's still
Right.
That has the ability to.
Everyone, what happens is what's down there.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, folks, we don't wait. We're sorry that, yeah, person decides not to do revising.
Brian signed.
He was listening to efficiency, so what you're out of that.
Where we go is it?
Oh, I remember, I got what I was ready to. Oh, service span. Yeah, not for the lady. And then the person has the. And then
But you're right there. That's
You're about 3 minutes. You are gonna be recording that. You're right, guys.
we had. They can get to this. Well, I don't know. They have to say that. Yeah, that's what they talk about, is having frequency. Yeah. It's in terms of.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up if people have enough time to discuss.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna go ahead and.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is, each group, hear a little bit about your papers and what their mobility challenges are, and then what we'll be writing up here are kind of the broader challenges you've identified and needs. So this contributes to our vision conversation, which is the next piece. So with that, I already forgot. That's anybody. I remember you guys had Sarah, so how about that? Let's start with you.
All right, I guess, I'll use the designated, letter. So Sarah is a 48-year-old, single mother who lives downtown as a, child of high school age. Goes to that stuff in the, very suburban neighborhood. She has challenges and such. She didn't have to for chance to move. The area where she lives, that because it's a huge neighborhood, mostly suburban. She's may have not accessibility to transit as it is. Also, as she's a worker, presumably full-time worker, her needs to rest with your child who's in high school and then probably has activities after high school. What else?
Whenever we touch on, just briefly, she likes to do ride bicycle, and she not have good, reasonable routes. You see, like, team from both, but we agree.
But it's important to note, right, that somebody else, she can't bike, she might use the bus, but. And then he kind of, kind of just juggling all those different needs with her kids and her, at those times kind of said, right? Kids gotta go to school at different times, presumably, if she's trying to do. Presumably. So what kinds of, which of these challenges are LTV most able to?
I think, maybe a good sensibility of, food transit. There was, the deal with the first time last issue. And the high school is probably pretty transportation solutions, so they're excited to be heard. Here she's going to be going from neighborhood to Boston.
So, two school and then you guys can like after.
Yeah, the stage for the champion.
Literally. Anything else?
There, so this is 52.
Yeah.
Around.
So to make sure those options are available, they have in the evening, there's an actual practice for that. Anything else before we move on to Corey? Okay.
And I can't hear, so if you were saying Corey, that's why I answered.
That's Corey, please.
So Corey is your quintessential student, destinations or campus, University of Oregon, and then he's a Bristol, West Eugene. He lives with 3 roommates. Does not own a car or a bike. We said his parents should buy him a bike. We felt like what LTD, first off, what he really needs is transportation between schoolwork with a little bit of shopping, entertainment, and medical access to those areas. What LTD can directly address is reliability. By the way, we should have safety to either reliability or some category, as well as accessibility. Because the services we design, the vehicles we purchase, as well as the bus stops approach to access to LTD, we can directly affect accessibility. As 3 senior executives, we naturally delved into a conversation of what could we do, or what is our dependence for funding. We said 2 important areas are frequency and affordability, but that requires funding from outside partners. We have a fiduciary responsibility to be responsible with the funding we do have, but to move the needle on affordability and frequency, we really need a stronger pot of funding as it pertains to Plan 2045, is a stronger pot to fund all of this stuff. And I will pitch to my team. We're done.
Great. Like you mentioned that the French buying bike share.
And I was trying to be tongue in cheek, but obviously, and I'll just speak as Mike Hirsch. University of Oregon has been such an amazing community partner, but to me, they have a pivotal role expanding bike share in a way that's for the whole community, not just for the campus. But in my opinion, it's low hanging fruit for the university to help push through in our community.
Great. Okay.
Let's see.
Dear Jordan, Jerry, our young children, we live in Pleasant Hill, single family house. We're nurse, hard daily schedule include work, childcare, the projects. So for some of the ways we look at it right now is doesn't seem like they're right now is need. But we were saying in terms of mobility needs, to be more convenient. It's like when there was, regular reliable access from Jordan to get to her job at morning. So like that may happen. And of course we're depending back family owns 2 cars, we're assuming that the partners also employed that can change. We're not working anymore, employment can change, and so now we can move what. And of course different transportation that aren't just the local behavior member of high school. Maybe it'd be nice to have the kids, sort of availability of transportation or regular trips to housing areas and things like
Right. So Jordan is also our, the 3 are and those are people for leadership. So just curious if there's anything else in mind, thinking broadly about their communities or smaller communities, right? Part of your chart, just gonna ask, hey, right? So I think if somebody else who's not necessarily Jordan talk about something that That's your earlier about the corporate, I think that comes to mind.
One of the questions I can actually get to earlier was just, to actually ask really to the other folks, like how, when I talk to providers, and transportation from rural areas, it becomes decision made, we never go speaking with a provider vision, and he, and it made a decision, but only because he was able to access public transportation, without access. So things like that, you know, he's one big decision to live rurally, or maybe it's not a choice, because, you know, here for other reasons, but, accessibility, you know, but he, those are not can be a real issue.
Well, people who either can't drive or don't drive or friendly.
Yeah, for the, for adults who are 90, and still use 398 to go volunteer every week, so it's,
Anything else? Okay, and then,
So Raul is widowed, lives in a condo near Colebrook Road in He's retired. His trips are mostly local and daytime medical appointments, grocery shopping, library visits, volunteer shifts, and he still drives but has mobility difficulties and avoids night driving and trips. So we talked about the three areas of here: service span, frequency, first and last mile access. We're thinking about times of the year, maybe getting to medical appointments like during the day, but he doesn't like to drive at night. So where he normally might drive, he might think twice about it if he's going to be in the dark. So that would be kind of that first and last mile access. Frequency, Colebrook Road has pretty decent frequency, especially if we're talking about rural areas. So that was a definite consideration and something LTE can affect. As well as service span, service span was thinking about like the times that he uses. So proximity. I'm sorry?
So he doesn't drive at night.
Correct, he's not comfortable with it, yeah. Proximity, efficiency, and then evening transfer that we talked about.
yeah, I just found talking a bit about how it's easier to get someplace and can be difficult to get stuff. As they create a whole, just highlighted. That's a pretty frequent. Look at when families get things that they're using the they get there.
Sure, just 45 per year.
And I guess that first and last mile, well, I mean, Colebrook Road, we're assuming he has some pretty decent access. But if you're thinking about it's raining, you have a stroller, or those things. In his case, feeling safe getting to and from his bus stop might be something. But we felt like service span and frequency were kind of were something we really have power to affect these conditions.
We decided that road was better.
Cover road is pretty good.
Yeah, I like that. It has the most access and service of anybody that's here itself. Very point. Anything, thank you for engaging on this. Okay, so this hopefully was a good appetizer for good discussion. I know we started talking about this from our guests earlier on this very subject. But thinking about the discussion we just had and the kinds of things that LTD already or could have the power to affect changing. It's 20 years from now. So what has changed in training around innovation on what goes about, like, what sort of outcomes have we realized and the results? I think that the previous visioning exercise that they talked about at the start, that's only 5 years, 5 years, yeah. And I think, in this exercise, we're a little bit more thinking about services for delivery and kinds of things that the agency will support that, right, in terms of thinking about the vision. And then what does all these things being accomplished for what do they mean for Lane County Orange? LTD is a mobility manager, not the operator of us, that, but all these other things as well, right? So, try to get some open discussion questions.
But I guess for me, I think that more and more of the time and how to with the finer point to what our executive said around subsidized transportation. Like, I think there are so many things, even in talking about potential taxi services here. We heard someone pay like $60 or $90 to get to the airport from Potter's Grove, and that was their only option. And so, and to have a full-blown taxi service here is very untenable in terms of making money, being able to pay your drivers, whatever. So I think looking ahead and as a board member, thinking about when we're looking at the budget and we're projecting out as beautifully as we do, thinking about where our investments are and what our role is in that subsidy. And I'm glad to hear we're talking about diversity, but I think that needs to be something that we are definitely part of. How they, can afford those trips, they can afford the gas. There's so many pockets of our community, not just rural, that need help in transportation. It's a huge issue.
Specifically what's changed, I think bike share is gonna happen.
What was it?
Bike share, I think will happen. It better happen in the next couple of years.
When we say better happen, do you mean expanded, serving more areas?
More bikes. I mean, I want to separate the toes. Yeah, it needs to like be down here, it needs to be out Florence, and the buses need to be compatible, so to speak. It's not just a campus driven thing, but you anywhere in one county, there's the first mile, last mile, the starting point, should have access to bike.
And the infrastructure available to them for us to get to. So for some of the people who have home now,
Yeah.
they act first to find service.
Agreed. When you think about those folks, it's kind of body, those kids or those youths, what would you remind having them do? That question could go out if you're involved.
Well, I know there's some discussions that I've been part of where there were ideas that didn't necessarily come to fruition. A schedule would pick up a group, for example, at a time, transported to a hub or a base. That would address the person. Usually black. And, or on demand shit. But I mean, it's good. I mean, when I do talking about the feasibility, it's not that easy. So it's hard. Nobody questions if that could be a solution. It's really money.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of coordination too. So it would be like, remember Jason, we were talking to we did and the plan that was being constructed just with the down the road about making sure if
transportation was included on what we relied on. It was scheduled for the shifts, the workers that had shifts. You know, the bus is a great opportunity for people that have someplace to live, for a lot of people. So we schedule it for the buses, they can be sitting in for hours, you know, at work or later, they're late, you keep your feelings jeopardized. So it's this coordination with LTV, with businesses and places for people to make sure that they're aligned.
I'll give some examples about the mom, because that has been really involved in conversations here. Many disproportionately are Spanish and English speaking moms that need transportation. They run into certainly language barriers, but also car seats. If they're required to have car seats, and that's a good thing. But if they have multiple children in their care, getting from their apartment or whatever to the bus with their car seat, even if it's close, you're still hauling. And so we've done things like buy them those parts that they can either have the children in or the car seats in, and it's some kind of workaround. And we've, Cosette has talked with the contractor for the connector to have car seats available, and then also those collapsible carriages can stay on the bus while they're at our center receiving services, and then they don't have to carry that all in. And sometimes moms do bring their car seats in, that's fine. But, you know, those aren't ideal, but they are helpful and allow the moms to get to services that they really need.
We characterize that as out of the box, right, beyond just the sidewalks and other curb arrangements, but with the core problem we're trying to address.
So that chart is left at wherever they're going.
It's in the back of the bus, and the students, like they're just folding. We purposely let those collapse.
So it stays with them all the time.
Is there a car? Yes, we did that through a transportation grant. We helped buy the fuel trying to think outside of the box, like shopping and talking again. There are limits.
In terms of it's 2045, right now, like I get one of the many choices that I have, I have that. But coming from a place that very open in New York, where you always take the bus, always getting faster, unless you're like, right? And here it's a choice between an hour bus ride. So I would look to see trains and go from being not just one of my choices, but the most obvious choice. Like, it, you know, within the 15-minute bus ride, there's a 10-minute car ride down hours.
The bus is the easy choice, and a big piece of that sounds like it's time to.
Well, a little bit like we don't have to do anything. We're not going to do other things. The bus. Same time. If you're driving, hopefully
So on this note, on this bus, making the bus the easy choice, it's something I heard a lot from our first, through there, the first PAC meeting, the CAC meeting where they got out of the law and said, how do we make it the easy choice? Fact that it's one piece, not necessarily faster, reliable, as we mentioned. Are there other aspects of service that we've addressed that make choosing transit easy? Are there other things that you can do to make it easy?
Something about the schedule there, something like you were mentioning the shift work, you know, but I would also say, you know, start in time for school, or, you know, what area that route serves, that it complements whatever schedules are kind of. Yeah, if you're doing rides to what's the Schwab, cheaper, you know, like it could be really regular shows on the weekends there, because they're sports still, they're still. on this, can you let me drive that? Not that I'm.
Another reminder to what is like that. Restaurant permits, especially those constitution sugar.
Yeah.
So
We
this,
can't more about it downtown. We were still there, it's better, we're going to, the issue is going to be in restaurant, in less than much. Yeah, we're not gonna be dropped off from the house and again, there's some kind of, very regular transportation around, in and businesses could be working.
all transportation to everybody out there.
One of the opportunities we have with a planning process like this is the coordination with our agency partners, with Eugene, GPO, and of course the county, ODOT. But thinking about reliable transit that far into the future, we also have to think about how the communities in the metro area, especially grow. And there's a lot of planning for a lot more density, and and the goal is to try to create more walkable communities, and hopefully a lot of people moving here over the next 20 years may choose to not bring their cars, but allow them to and with them. And so how do we maintain reliable transit in the future if we have much more congestion? I mean, the reality is we might have much more congestion, but all of these information with our partners to make sure that transit can still move quickly, even within more congested areas. Not necessarily building big highways or fire.
Well, with those things, concerns, also things, there seems to be confusion. I understand policies around not bringing large garbage bags or something. I don't remember what it was, but people get confused about whether they can bring their food. So if they actually go down to the farmer's market and they, or bringing home, or go to community sharing, bringing home food boxes, sometimes there are limitations around that. So as a consideration, not only those that need it for basic needs, but people who might reuse it for shopping, that we need to consider our internal policies around that. I get that there are safety issues, but also basic needs.
Is there anything around my aspect of safety? But other security, otherwise, how things are different or the same.
New fare system, the seamless fare system, where the public doesn't feel that people aren't paying, and it's simple enough that people are paying.
Part of that making it easy to right.
When it comes to safety and security, there's a concept of this. There are some spillways that are right us. And we put a lot of effort with security, but that is a barrier to not be comfortable with a substance of people being around other people. So, and seniors and stuff, female, women, the various not that it's unsafe, but perception of safety is a little bit key.
Everyone feels safe.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I think, a lot of ground here. Everything from my, underlying media that we're thinking about what we've achieved in 20 years. I guess final call for anything else, you know? Yeah. This conversation was knowing that we're going to talk a lot more about this, and we're absolutely going to talk about priorities too here.
How do we do, how do we talk about it? So what are many success measures coming into the conversation? We go back and look at American household community surveys, you see what less than 4% use public transportation nationwide. So we miss an opportunity to talk to 96% of the people who are finding the service when they're using it. So are we thinking about how we talk about what success looks like for those that may not ever jump on a bus or on a bike share, but still get a benefit out of that are being rejected into the conversation?
Certainly is now. I like that very much. Like what does community success? What does success in the community writ large look like? What do you think?
Yeah, so we're having this big conversation at the state level. I like the fact that Mike brought in funding because we can make what we have work very highly, but without additional funding, it can't expand. Actually, if they were to quadruple the amount of state funding we get now, we'd be able to almost fill what we have today, statewide. So in terms of communicating the value proposition to learning and decision makers in Salem, Washington as well, and Congress as well, with the ROI of the system rate, what the ROI produces. I think that's important for us to be thinking about that. Because your question around what does LTV's role as the ability management mean for Lane County, the answer is dependent on Lane County needs. And so for us, I would think that we would be thinking through how are we planning the system. I firmly believe that it was very economics. How do we plan for aligning the priorities of the needs of the community with how we plan to deliver service and how we measure that service?
I think Ryan did hit on it briefly. There is an element of plan getting into performance measures that will be called success outcomes.
Yeah, I think we're going to get that as to how you communicate all the engagement activity. Thank you for the attention to doing. Getting that means for success to beyond knowledge.
It's going to sound bad. I don't mean it to be bad. For the purposes of the plan, what's going to sound bad is I'm glad we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the environmental aspect of it. But for this plan, LTD's approach to environmental sustainability, it needs to be addressed in the plan. It's unfortunate that a zero-emission bus doesn't compete viably, and candidly, purchasing one equates to less service that can be put on the road. By 2045, I certainly hope that we don't have the dependence on fossil fuels and the transit vehicles that are available are cost neutral and as reliable. And I think we would be remiss to the public if we issue a linear look ahead that doesn't state our position or our goals with respect to climate change and sustainability.
We do have the benefit of parametrics being the same in terms that help us with our climate plan from around. So very efficient.
I do think we need to be careful with that issue. I don't disagree.
That's why I said
that. At all, but I think we have to remember that we have certain part of our audience that embraces that and may even take the bus because they feel that they contribute to combating climate change. And there's another group that potentially can take that issue and say, you're just trying to force me on my car over an issue, I don't think it's.
So we just whispered to you. But I think we expose ourselves to criticism if we don't at least acknowledge that it's something to look at and that it's for the unity.
Yes.
I have a question about that. So some of these ideas we talked about, some of them are relatively, some of them are not. So what is the plan, or how does it turn into action? Like, I mean, how's that gonna happen? So we talk about it, and these ideas, and where are we gonna get them? Who's gonna take risks? What's gonna, and in this process, that there are part towards the end where that's really addressed. Like, this is really what we're gonna do, and this is really how we're funding, rather than, visioning and discussing, which is important because a lot of the ideas come up at some point. How are we gonna do it? How do we prioritize from this list?
Maybe jump in on the sort of how do you fund it question. We, as a district right now, we don't have a document or a plan that we can really articulate what we would deliver if we had. That really is kind of the purpose of it. Lay out this interesting area and say, if we want to go here, if we want to do service expansion, frequency increases, span increases, or new modes, we will take this much to fund it, and not just issues Sam's having, the JV's having. It's a very clearly articulate and the value too. We don't have that.
One point on we were talking about earlier, like, is that our thinking benefit is the broader community, just we've been talking a lot today about the folks who use these services, and a lot of people we're talking about today are the folks who use these services every day, or these are the people we're thinking about. But just remembering that I don't know what this here is, but Trivet, right, where it's nearly 3/4 of Trivet's population in Trivet service area uses the bus once a year, which is just a substantial share, right? So there is this large segment of the population who's using the services from time to time, right? And I just want to make sure we keep all those folks in mind as well. Rather than with that, next steps. So, I mentioned we're working on existing and future conditions, which, looking at, again, things in the ground today, but also projecting into the future, what's going to change, especially in terms of things like land use, population, employment, those kinds of core factors. And then what needs fall out of that analysis based on the technical assessment, and then all the outreach we're going to be having to keep doing. We're going to be very shortly starting to work on improvement options. And I think that our next meeting with you all will talk more about needs and the draft improvement ideas to get your thoughts on those.
That's all. To wrap up, I just want to say thanks for participating in the activity and having something today. Again, this is the first of 4 times that we'll be times when you kind of bring the final.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
All right, so according to my agenda, that adjourns the business meeting. And then we have an opportunity for closing remarks. Jason, you want anything like that?